So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to another custom scenario made by Eclipse 2500 of the Dark Cloud, the first of a two-parter or so I'm told, and I haven't gotten the second part yet, but hopefully that will be forthcoming soon. Obviously because I'm recording a month and a half in advance, I'm sure that all of this has already happened anyway. But, regardless of that, this has a kind of similar feel to that Eclipse scenario where it was Dol Amroth on the defence against their enemies in a city, and this one is Gondor, albeit this is a 3v5, so this is more akin to what a custom scenario can often be, Mordor at the gates of Gondor. This could be any number of Gondorian cities, to be fair, the name of which I'm sure that I will give it after the fact, after I've looked up a little bit more about some of Gondor's towns and which geographically this fits most of all, because it is on a river, albeit this could be the ocean. Third Age, or just generally the siege maps do tend to have this enormous cliff in the background, even the Grey Havens has that, so it could theoretically be on the coast as well. Regardless, we will be going through the attackers first and foremost, as is the way of things, and I think it's entirely Mordor armies that are on the attack. Regardless, WK first up. Moran on halberds will be useful against Gondor, albeit they do need to be careful because Gondor do have the advantage in terms of polearms, but the Moran on halberds are still a useful thing to have on the front line because they will do better than the other Mordor rank and file units against a faction like Gondor because of the phalanx, but mostly of course because of that extra armor piercing they offer. So defensive and offensive at the same time, halberds against the right kind of faction, and Gondor is most certainly that. Another unit of halberds pushing up this siege to have plenty of halberds in fact, so they should be able to fall back on them easily enough. Moran on infantry, Gondor has definitely got the advantage in terms of this kind of unit, albeit the Gondor infantry, it's more so because they've got better armour. Like, they're not hugely better than the Moran on infantry when it comes to dealing damage and in melee, but Gondor definitely have the edge when it comes to solid bread and butter units like this. But Mordor will still be reliant on their numbers, of course. I think there's nothing else up here. Actually, no, there is a unit that we almost missed from WK, which is going to be his General's Bodyguard, the Uruk Captains. A relatively cheap and cheerful bodyguard unit, but very useful against Gondor because, unlike most sword and board bodyguard units like this, they do have armor piercing, which makes them just that little bit better, especially against factions like Gondor. So, a decent enough unit. Certainly better than something like the Goblin King's Bodyguard, which lack that. Got some more javelins, pulling up some ladders as well. Orc Javelins always useful in a siege like this because the enemy's kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't shoot them, because they're so cheap that you don't really want to be using your valuable ammunition as the defenders on a unit like this, but if you don't, you'll be allowing them to get far more value off with their lower damage but still armor piercing javelins. So a real conundrum of a unit for Gondor to have to try and deal with here. 2 units of them. Over here we've also got the Temple Guard from WK, which armor piercing archers like this will always be deadly if you can get them into the right position in a siege like this, which is easier said than done. If all else fails, the Temple Guard is still a perfectly serviceable high-tier heavy swordsman unit with multiple HP. So that is also worth bearing in mind. We've got troll catapults galore from WK over here, so they're definitely going to be able to peel down some of the walls, and even when all is said and done, when the catapults are out of ammunition, the troll catapults still serve a bit of a purpose after the fact. Much more easy to use than other forms of artillery as well, because of how fast the trolls can push them around the map. Another unit here pulling up a ram, which is a unit of orc maulers with the armour upgrade. The impact that will have is going to be kind of negligible, but still it's better to have it than better than not. So yeah, armour piercing as well. Very useful against Gondor for the reasons that we've already gone through. Minas Morgul's chosen. A little bit of a departure this because they are much more a defensive unit for holding together the initial assaults that Mordor may engage in. Heavily armoured, very tanky, not the best at dealing damage, but still they will keep the attacks going. More of a damage dealing edge on the same kind of thing will be the Sauron's Will, an upper tier heavy axeman unit. Very useful against the likes of Gondor, but they do lack a shield, they are fragile in that way, so you do need to be careful. Temple Executioners with the armour upgrade as well. They will of course be very, very deadly. Gondor don't really have an equivalent unit to this, but their bodyguards are focused more around their defensive nature, so they don't really have an equivalent to the Temple Executioners as such. Minas Morgul chosen again, and we also have some Blackguard of Barad-dûr and more Moran on infantry back here, so the ability to push through lines always going to be a potential problem that Gondor have to deal with. Cohesion is going to be very important for them on this occasion. Then we have Buzzard, who also has Moran on halberds. Very unsurprising, there's a huge amount of artillery on display from Mordor here, which is going to be interesting because they will open up clearly by peeling away some of the walls at the front of this settlement. It would be very interesting to see how Gondor react to that. It will be also interesting to see if Mordor dump all of their ammunition all at once, or if they save some of it. They also take up valuable army slots though, so not quite as much for other higher tier units, perhaps. This is a scenario though, so the armies are all assigned. Sauron's Will pushing up the ram, again, armour piercing, very useful. Morannon halberds for shoring things up. Minas Morgul Chosen are there. The first unit of Olag High we've seen. Useful for getting in and amongst those lower damage, more defensive Gondorian units, potentially the Guards of Osgiliath if they're here. Got to be careful though, because a lot of the Gondorian spears and polearms do tend to have that armour piercing, which makes them a far more deadly opponent for the Olag High to try and meet in melee. Stuff like the Fountain Guard you would normally associate with the Trolls being quite good at disrupting their formations. Not so much the case here. The Fountain Guard are much less reliant on their formations and can do the business up close and personal as well. Sauron's Will, Minas Morgul Chosen, Morannon infantry, and some orc archers here as well. Useful to have these lower tier archers just so you can engage in a ranged battle with the enemy. Similar thing going on here with the orc javelins, but they are much less deadly than the orc javelins, it's worth saying. They're also a bit cheaper, to be fair, as well in normal circumstances. Uruk captains and temple executioners are once more. There are the orc javelins, and we have another unit of Blackguard of Barad-dûr as well. The final of the first wave of armies is going to be Morris. He has got again the clutch of catapults. Some Morannon archers, so he's going to be a little bit more capable of skirmishing back and forth with Gondor, albeit Gondor will still have the edge in that particular engagement to be sure. Sauron's Will. Got some more Morannon archers over here. A clump of maulers, halberds. There's all sorts in there as well. There is some orc, more orc maulers, Morannon infantry. And then over here, Minas Morgul Chosen and Sauron's Will, so it's the slightly higher tier units actually in and amongst the siege towers and the ram. Interesting indeed. And then back over here, in and amongst the orc encampment they have built, we have Mr. Sneakman, who's got some fodder. He's also got some mountain trolls, so it could be that these armies are actually weaker. So if Gondor can weather the initial storm, they could put themselves into a pretty good position. Morannon infantry, more Morannon infantry, in and amongst the orc architecture, I was going to say, but hovel might be the better word for it. There is some Sauron's Will back here. There is also some temple executioners as well. Morannon guard, lower end spears, Morannon halberds, orc archers. There, interesting little layout this. Orc javelins, with the first armies being the stronger and then the second armies being slightly the weaker. But lots of numbers back here for Mr. Sneakman as well, and I would assume his compatriot as well back here. So Blackguard of Barad-dûr there. We also have Mevin, Blackguard of Barad-dûr, Uruk captains, Sauron's Will and Temple Guard, and the rest I would assume, yep, orc fodder, plenty of maulers and Morannon units as well. So that is pretty much the state of play. He's also got some more mountain trolls back here, the least remarkable of all the combat trolls in the game, because the cave trolls I think are actually slightly weaker than the mountain trolls in melee, but they do push through lines very, very easily. The mountain trolls have a bit harder time doing that. So yeah, interesting little layout. The three armies at the front, perhaps the more deadly, and then the final two just to try and close things out. So we move on to the defenders, starting off with Eclipse himself, playing as one of the Gondorian armies. He has got some Gondor archers over here, armour upgrades all round, which for Gondor is a big deal, because they can generally apply 2 to their units, making them significantly tougher to break down. We've got some more Gondor archers up on the walls. It'll be interesting to see if those artillery men or artillery trolls make them regret that decision. Gondor infantry with the armour upgrade, Inarius playing as them, will just go through the town as is. Warns of the White Tower, a bodyguard, a sword and board unit. Citadel Guard are in there with, I think those are the Guards of Osgiliath, are they not? Yes, I can see some. So Guards of Osgiliath are in there. More Citadel Guard. Deadly front line that for the pikes and the armour piercing spears. Axemen of Lasarnak with the armour upgrades, especially good at dealing with the rank and file orcs cracking through that armour, which gives them all their survivability, really, like it's not even there. Veterans of Osgiliath will need to be careful because the catapults will certainly target down any section of wall that they are stood on. Ravenhells will be good at dealing with the rank and file orcs as well. Gondor infantry over here. It's a fairly big settlement to try and cover though. Again, it'll be interesting to see how the orcs spread themselves out or whether they concentrate their forces. Marksmen of Caer Andros, really good at dealing damage at range, and then they'll pull out that two-handed sword in melee as well. A really good multifaceted unit, especially at dealing with more numbers-focused factions like the orcs. Pelagia Marines, javelins, maybe not quite as efficient generally as the orc javelins, but they are better, which in a scenario is ultimately what you're going to want to see. Fountain Guard here from Tundra's Fox as well. Incredibly useful unit that for the armour piercing. Axemen of Lasarnak, Citadel Guard, We also have some Wardens of Minas Ithil for their armour-piercing projectiles, a trebuchet, that's just the trebuchet crew. Plenty of armour-piercing back here for the Gondorians. As we get into the centre of town, veterans, more veterans. They're locked morale as well, which will make them difficult to break down in the late game. Guards of Osgiliath with more Citadel Guard and Fountain Guard. And then we get into the final bunch of units. Inarius with his Ravenhelms, more Axemen of Lasarnox. So plenty of two-handed weapons here for Gondor. Good for dealing damage. We'll see if that will be the difference maker. Fountain Guard, Citadel Guard, Vanguard of King Elisar, which are not technically a unit that are in the game anymore, but here they are, coming out for scenarios, as stuff like the Mountain Uruk Archers are another unit of that, which seem to live on beyond their demise, because they are in the game file still, so scenarios can still use them. Guards of Osgiliath, Citadel Guard, Fountain Guard, and there is a unit outside the walls as well, in the Gondor infantry. So, without further ado, let's begin. And I'm not going to make a cut here because I would imagine that the troll catapults are going to start bombarding the walls very, very quickly. It's going to be one of those battle replays as well where I think the frame rate is going to be a little bit choppy to start with because of all the movement that we're going to be seeing from the orcish side of the field. And there we can see the troll catapults do start to roll forward. But I do like the difference that this siege battle has in that the scarier armies on the surface of it are the first three, and then the second two armies have to be the closers, albeit they could change that dynamic around pretty quickly because it's not as if the distance that Mevin and Mr. Sneakman have to march is insurmountable, and they could very easily be the first ones in and they could all collapse upon the settlements at once, which would be the smart thing to do, I think. And then look over here. There's so many troll catapults as well, 3 per army here at the front, which makes about 9 artillery pieces in total. That is a potential headache that Gondor will have to deal with throughout this battle. Not only for the artillery pieces either, but also the fact that they are actually useful once their artillery ammunition has been expended, being that it is the troll catapult, so it's not even as if you can hope for all of these artillery pieces to be completely useless at range. Just peel away the walls and then you can deal with them as they come, because the trolls themselves are still going to be capable in melee when all is said and done. It looks as though Morris is going to reposition himself over to here, so he's going to hit this side of the settlement. Possibly we're going to see Buzzard hit the middle, and then WK hit the other side of the settlement, although Gondor are actually coming outside the walls, which is a bold move. I'm not sure how useful this is necessarily going to be. These Gondor archers will get a few volleys off as the orcs push forward. But yeah, I think Tundra's Foxy thinks better of that, because the volleys that you get off are going to be not all that damaging. Maybe if you hit something like the Sauron's Will, it could be useful. Moving back, there are a few stakes in place. Gondor infantry, yeah, they're going to pull back into the settlement through the gatehouse over here, which is undoubtedly going to be WK's intended destination. He's actually going to shoot some of his catapult ammunition. I mean, he's got enough of it, but no, yeah, as I suspected, he's going to shoot into the walls. Although that is technically a building, the flaming projectiles are less accurate, so I'm sure you can see there's also some of this ammunition bombarding the settlement. There may be some sort of rule where you have to use the artillery to bombard the settlement, carpet bomb it as it were, and hope that you can do a bit of damage. That might be what they're going for thematically. A bit of a hit there. A grazing blow on this unit of Pelagia Marines, but nothing too devastating that Tundra's Fox should be all that concerned about. Over on the other side, yeah, you can see the artillery piece is going to get up onto the high ground over here and bombard the settlement from this direction as well. Try and peel away some of those walls. More hits. I mean, they're going to be doing plenty of damage. Ooh, and that was a fortuitous hit right into the middle of some Fountain Guard. A lot of these shots are going wayward, but more shots like that will definitely help the Mordor cause. Fortunately for Gondor, there's plenty of buildings for them to hide behind. So far, the bombardment phase underway. Mountain Trolls waiting. The first volleys from the archers of Gondor, veterans of Osgiliath, are they going to be shooting at? Sauron's Will, good choice of target, pushing up the ram, which was a little bit of a strange decision anyway, but yeah, Sauron's Will, Moran on halberds. Gondor will not be short on potential targets here. Sauron's Will, the better of the two, even though the halberds do have that phalanx that they can fall back on. The Sauron's Will are ultimately too dangerous in melee to be left alive if you can help it. Troll catapult. So let's see what Morris decides to focus down the first. You can see here plenty of bombardment coming in, so I assume, yeah, there is a rule that the catapults can't just peel away each individual section of wall, which I think is for the best, because 9 troll catapults means that the walls may as well not even be here. So they have to bombard the settlement itself with it. Uruk captains taking a bit of damage as they push the ram. And there are, of course, those arrow towers as well, which should be quite interesting. Return fire from the trebuchets. No hits, though, by the looks of things. No, there was a bit of a hit, actually. Only a couple of those Moran on infantrymen, though. Flaming shot only would be an interesting rule as well. Mordor will have to make do with the reduced accuracy. I mean, these buildings over here taking a real beating. The city is going to have seen better days by the end of this one, certainly. And then Buzzard also firing and getting some good grazing hits on Nimlothian Honor Guard, I think, as well as some Gondor infantry. Definitely good hits there. If you have to try and snipe out infantry from beyond the walls, then that's exactly the sort of target you want to be going after. It's impossible to keep track of all of these artillery blows as they come, because there are so many of them. They're hitting different sections of the city. Plenty of these buildings going to show signs of wear and tear. None of the towers have been hit yet. Ooh, I think there was a hit there. Not entirely sure what a tree is doing on these walls, but such is the way of map generation sometimes. More hits within the centre of the city. But so far, Gondor won't be too concerned about all of this. Ooh, a very lucky hit there. Hitting Eclipse's trebuchet. And he's going to need to move his surviving artillery piece, because that would be a significant loss for Gondor. They need to make sure those trebuchets stay active for later on when the blob fights inevitably start. Narrow misses all round, but such is the way of flaming projectiles. More devastating, but not as accurate. And the smokestacks are going to start to rise from the city. Ooh, close. The building, preventing more of the vanguard and more of the Nimlothian Honor Guard from being hit. This, I suppose, is more akin to what a siege would be. Just flinging a bunch of projectiles over the walls. This is a lot of fiery shot. They are going to try and bring down the gates as well. A unit of mountain trolls pushing up the ram from Mr. Sneakman. Which is good, because archers, arrow towers, less likely to bring them down as they do so. Far less likely to rout as a result. Looks like he's pulling back from the reinforced gates for now. Maybe the rules are that you have to finish the bombardment phase first. This is more for spectacle than anything else, though, because Gondor, they have taken a few hits such as this. Veterans of Osgiliath, a worthwhile unit to go after. But if your hands are tied with how you can use your artillery, they're very lucky, honestly, that one of those projectiles hasn't hit centre mass of the Citadel Guard and Guards of Osgiliath as of yet. More fiery boulders streaking through the air. Again, the narrow nature of the streets and the large nature of the buildings providing some good cover for the Gondorians so far. Eclipse, is he going to shoot with his archers? If he's not, he's going to need to get them off the walls, because Minas Morgul Chosen are on the way. Good choice, because the archers won't want to hit them if they can. That tower has been destroyed, as has that building. What are they going to do here? Mountain trolls? Looks like they're just setting the siege equipment up with this unit of mountain trolls. Albeit they've missed a bit of a trick doing that with the ram, because it has been caught fire now by the arrow towers. More flaming boulders of justice. Oh, hitting centre mass into the Citadel Guard as well, so while all of this artillery could have been used more effectively if the attackers didn't have to follow rules such as this, Gondor haven't gotten off scot-free. Yes, and the archers have been taken down from the walls. Interesting that Gondor infantry are up here. I mean, Vanguard of King Elisar will do a lot of damage to Minas Morgul Chosen. Going to need to get these siege towers into place a little bit more quickly now, though, because they could be set ablaze by these towers on the walls. Still the bombardment continues. Lots of damage done to these buildings over here. Relatively narrow gatehouses as well. Similar in nature to the ones that are on Osgiliath itself. Thunderous Fox still trying to manoeuvre around the bombardment. Citadel Guard and Fountain Guard ready to receive the first of the Mordor assault. What will Morris send in there first? I mean, it's all well and good sending the Uruk captains in there, but they'll be right into the teeth of units which are very, very strong. So I'm not sure I'd recommend it, actually. Marksman of Care Andros. Firing into the Morannon archers, perhaps more out of necessity because Mordor continuing to fling projectiles over the walls. They may not be quite as devastating if they hit as the catapult shots, but there are certainly far more of them, so Gondor are going to respond in kind with some Marksman of Care Andros. Look at all of this. The fires set alight all over the city. Inarius ready for this assault. I'm not sure what they're doing from the front here. I don't know what they hoped to accomplish with those rams, with those mountain trolls setting up all of this equipment. Eventually the time is going to have to come where they will need to start moving in. Still yet more. They've managed to... I mean, there is a shot there for them potentially, but have to wait and see if that comes good. WK, the troll catapult crew, actually pushing up the towers now, which is not a bad idea. It's like the orc form of recycling, I suppose. Are they moving in through the gates? Yes, they are. So the first melee engagements erupting now as Morris's Mordor forces pushing through the gatehouses. They're actually unopposed up here, which is kind of interesting. I mean, it's only a unit of Morannon infantry, I suppose, but good opportunity here. Also a good opportunity to use the Pelagia Marines, so they've set up a really good avenue that they can utilise for those javelins. So it's going to be painful for Mordor to try and push through here, but you would expect that in a 5v3. What you would also expect is that Mordor should have the numbers to carry this fight through to a positive conclusion for them. Pelagia Marines waiting. There are some Gondor infantrymen. Some Axemen of Asanak in there as well. Moving over towards WK's side of the field. Still the arrow towers continue to pepper the attackers as they approach, but also a little bit slower paced in other parts of the field. Again, we've seen a few times over the last few replays that, as I was saying, we've seen a few times how the attackers, if their assault isn't unified, then it can prove to be a bit of a problem for them. Having said that, they are now pushing forward with a little bit more haste. Also see here Marksman of Care Andros, also the potential to try and bring down that siege tower. That's an interesting idea. I don't know if that's what they're aiming for, but it could be an interesting byproduct. Regardless, I mean, Mordor have certainly got the numbers to withstand a fair beating like this, but they can't afford to stay out in the open against all of these archers for too long. Over on the other side, meanwhile, a lot of damage being done. Axemen of Lassarnak ready to potentially reinforce the Gondor infantry which are manning the walls, but you can see here from the front, much slower from Buzzard. Some of those catapults have been brought down low by the towers as well, but let's go and check in again on the one melee engagement which is currently underway on the field. Some of the Minas Morgul chosen to push through. Spears do tend to be a little bit better than that, or better at that than most other kinds of units. So it's not too surprising to see them do that, but are they overextending themselves? The siege tower somewhere on the field has fallen. Lots of range damage being poured into this Mordor blob, but also the walls potentially being overrun. There's some Uruk captains up here. There's also the Morannon infantry pushing against the Gondor infantry that are trying to man the walls. Plenty of points of entry as well. Morannon infantry routing in the face of the marksmen of Caer Andros. They can certainly handle themselves in melee, as I said. It's really the best feature of that unit. Citadel Guard are there. More arrows being thrown over the walls. Do they have reinforcements on the way? Yep, Mr. Sneakman's coming forward with some fodder, some infantry. Because more is going to be needed. Gondor are doing pretty well at holding that line, but at least they're attacking over here. They will need to start doing the same in other sections of the battlefield, and they are doing so now. The WK mounting an assault on the walls as well. The Axemen of the Sarnak will be good against the Morannon infantry. They'll also be good against the Troll catapult crew. Even better perhaps against the Troll catapult crew because of their lighter armour than other trolls. Could be the Ravenhelms of Caer Andros. They will take damage in return, of course, but you can see how quickly the Troll catapult crews are starting to fall away now. And over here, some Morannon halberds trying to back up another group of the catapult crew. Now that the bombardment phase is over, they are good as nothing other than a bludgeon, and they're not bludgeoning very hard at the moment. Gondor able to withstand the beatings of lower end trolls such as this. We do have a little bit coming forward from Mevin as well, some Orc Maulers. Actually just in guard mode here, and they're going to try and shoot point blank. I don't think they'll rout them. I mean, they certainly won't rout the trolls. And with troll support, I doubt the Maulers will rout either. More Maulers pouring up onto the wall. Interesting place for a tree again. There's a troll in and amongst there, but I don't think we'll zoom in there for too long. They are now going to launch their attack directly from the front. Rotting meat has been used, a cloud of meat funk around the gate. Another troll catapult crew, so they're all being committed forward now that they're out of ammunition, and why not? I would say that they're better off used in more of a supporting manner than trying to use them all on their lonesome like this, especially against a faction with good infantry for dealing with this sort of thing like Gondor. But we shall see. If they're just the initial wave in, then so be it. Marksmen of Caer Andros still shooting, more infantry being committed forward. Things seem to be going pretty well over here for the Gondorians. Pelagian Marines trying to fire in, but not being given the opportunity to now that Morris's troll catapult crews are also on the way forward. That's not actually Gondor infantry, it's Gondor archers, so all sorts of skirmishers being engaged now by all of these trolls. And that is a low frame rate because of all of the unit models that are trying to push through. I mean, they've had success in pushing through. I just don't know if they're going to be able to keep up the pressure. Oof. That frame rate though. I wonder if it's all the particle effects as well. Axemen of the Sarnak ready to move in, should they be required to. Plenty of orcs on the field still. Spreading themselves out of the gatehouse a little bit. That is a lot of troll catapults. There's also the mountain trolls up there. That would have to be Morris's general, surely, having marched into the lion's den of his own accord. Yeah, mountain trolls, better than the catapult crew, of course, in melee. And they're going to respond to this by sending 2 Ravenhelms at him. There's also the Gondor infantry, which can be used to sandwich them from the other side. Still, the arrow towers will keep pipping away as well at the enemy manpower. More troll catapult crew. Gondor infantry not really the best at dealing with trolls, but because it's the troll catapult crew, they should be fine. I don't think they will have what it takes. Meanwhile, Sauron's Will up on the wall now, try and help deal with the already slightly damaged Axemen of the Sarnak after the initial wave that came up this siege tower. Now they're going to try and do some more damage with them. Another gate falls. See over there, Minas Morgul chosen up on the wall as well, who will be better at keeping themselves alive, but also taking all kinds of arrow fire. Gondor good with their skirmishers, plenty of options in that regard. And over here, still this gate stands tall, which means these arrows also continue to slowly but surely wear away at the attacker's manpower. Gondor archers firing in. Doing a good amount of damage there. Elsewhere, let's see. Over here, looks like outright victory for Gondor, which is really bad news for Mordor. I think Morris, if he was going to... He attacked maybe slightly too early, and he didn't have any support, it was just him, and it's always a bad sign when you're running away from a possible way into a settlement, tail between your legs, because you know you don't have the manpower to continue that assault. It bodes ill, honestly, for Mordor. That's the sort of thing which you can judge a battle by, and going forward we could see more and more likely a Gondor victory. We'll have to wait and see though, because Mordor in other parts of the battlefield certainly have enough to continue their assault. Ran on guard, pushing forward, dealing with some Gondor infantry. The trolls that are up on the wall doing a pretty good job. Whatever happens to those Raven Helms? Did they get retreated again? Are Gondor going to pull back immediately? Looks like it. Looks like they are going to pull back. Which is interesting, because in a city like this, you can overlook a pathway through it more easily than you can on other maps. So you do need to pay attention. Meanwhile, Sauron's Will taking damage still. Arrows in behind that Citadel guard line, so they need to try and get into melee as quickly as they can. There are the Raven Helms, only 15 of them remain. Defeat seems certain, only a military genius could win this battle. There's a river of arrows trying to shoot into the Uruk captains. Good armour, shielded, for Orc standards. But that multiple HP is what will save them initially from those volleys. Trolls moving through. Again, some of these units have been cut off a little bit. I'm not entirely sure if Inarius acted too quickly in pulling back from that gate, unless he moved back to re-engage. Because Mordor do have an opportunity here. If they push forward aggressively, there's several units they could catch out. And if they were to do that, you would really worry for Gondor in the future of this fight, because throwing away manpower like that is never going to yield you positive results. Eclipse has got some units here in the city. As long as they know what they're doing, as long as they know where they want to engage, it's not too much of a problem. We'll have to wait and see on that. Some routing orcs that are in the settlement, but are of no threat anymore to the Gondorians. Rotting meat being flung into the city now. Already this place is despoiled, but there's some axemen of the Sarnak as well. They need to leave something on the walls just to slow everything down, but this Gondor infantry isn't going to last too much longer, you would have thought. Orc archers in the city. Now they don't have to deal with the wall in front of them. This is a good opportunity for a unit of cheap archers like this to score some good value for themselves as they shoot down the road. Gondor good at absorbing that kind of punishment, generally speaking. But over here, another big push into the settlement. WK leading the way with some trolls and the Blackguard of Barad-dûr. Certainly your line is going to lose a bit of its shape when you're having to deal with that sort of thing. But with all of this armour piercing, Fountain Guard, Axemen of the Sarnak, the Javelins in support as well, Mordor, just like they did on the other side, are very likely to take an awful lot of damage as they try and get through here. This unit of Guards Mosgiliath won't last too much longer though, especially if more and more orcs start to pour into the settlement, which does seem to be the plan. And there's also some routing of Sauron's Will back here. It takes quite a lot to rout the Sauron's Will. Warns of Minas Ithil firing their AP arrows in, which, yeah, AP arrows against Temple Executioners is going to be very, very good. Victory seems certain, only a fool could lose this battle. I mean, they're very good in melee here, the Temple Executioners, but if they're getting hit in the side by those armor-piercing arrows, then they won't last forever. There's too many Gondor infantrymen for them to have to try and hack and slash their way through. Meanwhile, further north, the units that were victorious on the walls are having to try and push their way into a solid Gondor front line, and so far Tundra's metal wall is holding up pretty well, you would have to say. As we take a cursory glance along this wall, there really isn't all that much left. Temple Executioners and Orc Maulers finishing off what must have been one last combatant. who I'm sure was routing. But look at this, look at all of these Mordor orcs pushing their way forward now. The trebuchet giving Mordor a taste of their own medicine, perhaps. Most of those would have been orc archers, so not the most important thing, but just letting Mordor know they can't just do whatever they please with their skirmishes and get away with it. Gondor infantry back over there. Moran on halberds. And the Axemen of Lasarnak are still over here. So Gondor do still have some stuff on the outer reaches of their settlement, but they do need to be careful that they have enough of it here to make a decent stand, or just retreat it back to rejoin the rest of their armies. And still these towers are going to... There's so many towers over here actually, that Mordor will continue to take a little bit of damage. The longer that they linger near these walls... That hit there, just landing slightly short. I mean, they've clearly done a ton of damage. Just look at all of the smokestacks that are belching out their foul black fumes over the city. And we've got here Orc Maulers squaring off against another heavily depleted unit of Gondor infantry. And there's too many of them. Their melee defense can be an issue against units like this, but the Orc Maulers with their AP, exactly the sort of thing you want to see go up against the Gondor infantry, especially with a numbers advantage. Veterans of Osgiliath pushing towards the front lines as well. Orc Javelins getting into an ideal position now from WK. And trying to hold on to this position from Tundra's Fox could end up being a bit of a mistake if these Orc Javelins can start to rain down some armour-piercing goodness onto that front line below them, which undoubtedly is the plan. In an ideal world, Gondor would want to engage this in melee, but I don't think they're going to be able to, and that is going to be really, really nasty. How much ammunition do they really have? Plenty of support coming from Gondor as well, but it's not going to be quite as well positioned nor as deadly as those javelins are being. Gondor are winning over here. WK has peeled off some of his units to occupy this back corner of the settlement, but for the most part his attack has been halted at this gate almost completely in a not dissimilar way to how Morris's was. There just wasn't enough here to keep this assault going in relatively confined conditions, and the quality of the Gondorian infantry before them was too great. And over here, Gondor archers continuing to fire. And they are firing into javelins and maulers, so they will score a decent amount of kills. Backing up this unit of Gondor infantry is now a unit of Pelargia Marines, so Gondor definitely with a vested interest in trying to get to those javelins in melee. Still plenty of Gondorian forces, but there's also plenty more Mordor forces as well, and I would assume, yes indeed, Mordor are pushing forward now, not going to be content to sit back forever. There is another hit from the trebuchet, but it misses once again, so not great performance here, not a great performance here by the Gondorian artillery. Gondor infantry with Axemen of Lasarnak mixed in. There's also the Citadel Guard to offer that extra rigidity. Plenty of damage, plenty of armour, but will they stand indefinitely against Mordor? It's going to be a tough task. I mean, the Olag High have got the ability to do damage. Pelargia Marines the only support they can offer for that front line as well. Marksmen of Caer-Andros are ready. Mordor's still not attacking this way, which is quite interesting. I'd have thought that this area was ripe for the taking, but Mordor instead are going to focus on other things. This from the front is where Mordor are still at their very strongest. The two side assaults are honestly being slowly but surely brought under control. More reinforcements are necessary. You can see Mevin concurs, and his Sauron's Will are being sent over here to try and give a little bit of support, because once again this Gondorian infantry force is really showing its expertise. There are Temple Executioners on the front line as well. Undoubtedly will be a concern. Really good hits there though from the trebuchet. Right into the centre of those Sauron's Will. And that is devastating. Really good positioning there from the artillery. This trebuchet having better luck than the one which is trying to shoot through the central lane. There's a lot of arrows as well. Marksman of Caer-Andros. Pushing up with some Fountain Guard. A depleted unit of Fountain Guard, but very useful nonetheless. The Javelins trying to target the Fountain Guard down, so Mordor and Gondor going after the right targets with their skirmishers. Mordor, though, have got plenty more disposable units that they can utilise when you compare them to Gondor. Pelargia Marines showing that they are intended to be a sort of hybrid unit. Light to medium infantry and melee, so they should be pretty good at dealing with these orcs, especially seeing as it's just orc archers. Shouldn't be too much of a concern to lay them low. What's happening at the back of the settlement here? These depleted units that WK managed to squeeze through. I mean, it's Temple Guard, so just sending a token force of Axemen of Lasarnak is not going to be enough. Temple Guard and Orc Javelins, but more so because of the Temple Guard. The Axemen of Lasarnak are not going to be able to withstand the Black Númenóreans in melee. I'm actually quite surprised they're not going to leave them in melee, but perhaps they want to use the Javelins on them and then overrun them. Many of these Gondor archers firing, only, interestingly enough, the side ranks firing, which is strange. You'd have thought it'd be the other way round. Over here, Mordor continuing to push in, but Gondor, seeing the danger, are just going to try and shore this line up as much as they possibly can. I mean, they've got so many pikes and fountain guards that maybe they will be able to hold on to this indefinitely. We'll have to wait and see. Pushing forward. I mean, the Pelargia Marines, do they still have ammunition? I think they do. They're clutching javelins, so if Mordor do push much further forwards, I'm sure that we'll see this unit of javelins also open up. That is a lot of pikes. Mordor might have to just use outright brute force to try and at least buckle this formation a little bit. Maybe not outright push through it, but we'll have to wait and see. This road is also now being explored as a possibility for Mordor, pushing forward with Moran on halberds. They'll be good against Moran on infantry, less so against Fountain Guard. Gondor infantry, I should say. There also probably aren't enough of them here to make this assault stick. Are they following through with another unit? They're not, so if you're going to commit to an assault like this, you're going to need more than one unit for my liking. Pelargia Marines have pushed back, so Gondor reclaiming this section of wall, which should allow this infantry to continue to hold its position for a little bit longer, but at this point there's not many of them left, and they're having to go toe-to-toe with stuff like Temple Executioners, which is really rough for them. They're going to have to rely on their armour and their survivability. Veterans of Osgiliath, though, will stand their ground to the bitter end, even against Temple Executioners, especially with that armour upgrade that they're rocking. A very tanky unit indeed. They could still use the Trebuchet, potentially. Looking like that unit of Wands of Minas Ithil is out of ammo. They have drawn their blades. Now they're going to come in here a little bit too late, though. That unit of Axemen of Lasarnak finished off in its entirety. They need to send forward again. More than a single unit. A unit of Gondor infantry is not going to be enough. I think I saw another unit on the way down here as well. Citadel Guard and another unit of Citadel Guard. So with two units of Citadel Guard and this unit of Gondor infantry, that should be enough to bring this force down. But this Gondor infantry is going to take a lot of damage before they arrive. Temple Executioners, nasty, nasty unit. God, my shoulder really hurts today. I've done something to it. Maulers pushing forward, a little bit more serious about trying to push down this road now. Gondor having to back up a little bit, try and get a slightly better engagement for themselves. This will potentially expose this wing of the Gondorian army as well, albeit this could be a bit of a lost cause. There's still ranged support, however, so maybe it's not as much of a lost cause as you might expect. Veterans of Osgiliath will not beat Temple Executioners in melee, but those Orc Javelins also menacingly getting back into position on the walls after Gondor maybe trying to retreat. Can't blame them, but need to retreat as a cohesive unit. If they don't, then they will pay the price for it. Orc fodder. I mean, they're starting to run low here on this front line. Mordor are running out of steam. They've got plenty of other units they could commit forward, but Gondor will be quite pleased with the fact that they have elected not to do that at this point in time. Fountain Guard being cycled off the front. Round infantry are back there. Few volleys from those Javelin boys. Where are we? There's a few units nestled away over here. I'm wondering if... Yes, so Mordor are now attacking over here. Or at least a token force is attacking. Moran on infantry and Moran on guard, trying to push their way through this unit of Marksmen of Caer Andros. I mean, there's two units of them, but Marksmen of Caer Andros should be good against both, so it's going to have to come down, as it often does for Mordor, about a game of numbers. Pushing forward with them. Mordor still have plenty of stuff outside of the walls itself, which can be committed forward. I'm sure they'll try and do that once the town centre is in sight, but they may not have the luxury of doing that, because Gondor's front line here is holding firm, and a combination of Morannon archers and orc fodder in melee is not going to do much to make them feel uncomfortable, especially not with some trebuchet fire coming in. That could be enough to rout some of this rabble pretty fast. As we push through the smokestacks, let's go and see what's happening over here. This could be the end, actually. Yeah, that orc fodder is running away. There's the temple guard trying to escape along the walls, but WK's small force that was behind enemy lines essentially has been dealt with. The Gondor archers killing off another enemy general there. Could that be over here, I wonder? Oof, temple guard climbing up the ladders. I mean, temple guard are going to be so much stronger than Gondor archers. This is something which may add up over time here for Gondor, the fact that they're taking a lot of damage. Like, a lot of these units, little one-on-one engagements, too many of them have been like Mordor's elites against units they can easily kill. Minas Morgul Chosen pushing through. They're trying to really put the screws to this Gondor front line now, and they are succeeding, because for the most part it's only a unit of scattered Gondor archers that do remain, and they will be brought down eventually, but they've made Mordor pay for it. A lot of losses from Mordor here. There is also the Mordor force that was pushing down this road over here, for the most part successfully. Orc maulers finishing off some stragglers. Similar story with the Morannon infantry. There is one veteran of Osgiliath which is still fighting the good fight, but surely not for too much longer with all these orcs around him. Learning by Boromir's example, clearly. Yeah, I mean, Gondor at this point are going to have to pull back, because otherwise they're going to find themselves cut off. They're going to have to leave something behind as a rear guard. Again, perhaps this has happened a little bit too much at this point. This will concern Gondor, but if there's a time to be hyper-aggressive from Mordor, I would say it's probably now. Otherwise you could end up playing into Gondor's hands by not committing enough. Gondor ultimately beating back these two assaults from these two angles, and it could be a real problem for you from then on. We'll see if that does turn out to be the case. Still some Vanguard of King Elisar, which we haven't actually seen in action really, but that's because they've been a part of blob fights almost exclusively at this point. More veterans of Osgiliath charging in. So many Morannon units on the field today. But Gondor have had to try and hack and slash their way through, and I say try, they've been mostly successful at that in the battle thus far. Onto the White Tower, they still have a good amount of strength here, located in the town centre, bound up in stuff like Fountain Guard, Bodyguard tier units. Is it going to be enough to deal with the numbers though? This was always going to come down to quality versus quantity. The classic confrontation between Gondor and Mordor. Orc maulers having to lead the way. Their armour piercing is good universally against Gondor, but they themselves as a unit don't have the ability to keep themselves alive for long enough to be hyper effective against the Gondorians. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. And over here, Mordor pretty much victorious at this point. Some Gondor archers, some Pelagia Marines, really just a case of hunting down some stragglers. Guards of Osgiliath, there's a few Gondorian units still over here of note. These Citadel Guardsmen, I think, should probably be pulled back at this point alongside the ones of Minas Ithil to the town centre. The time has come to consolidate. Rotting meat, you'd think that the orcs would love the smell of rotting meat, but mechanically it's a really useful tool to use against them. They're much more likely to rout. More units being pushed onto the front line. I think they managed to finish off the Gondorians outright managed to pull back from there, which Mordor maybe weren't in a position to capitalise on as much as maybe they should have been. Oof. The rather off-putting squelching sound of a bloated cow carcass. A lot of these units are quite depleted from Gondor as well. It's a lot of bits and pieces of units at this point which they're looking to try and hold the line with, which could be a potential problem. I mean, we're into the final 10k frames now, so it really is a case of can Mordor overwhelm Gondor, or will Gondor hold firm? At this point, Mordor need to throw everything forward. Gondor really hold up around the town centre. You have all of this stuff out here which is just stood around doing nothing. Needs to be thrown in now for me. The trebuchet, it might just be trying to lull Mordor into a false sense of security. Maybe it does still have some legitimate ammunition remaining, and they're just using the rotting meat to try and fool Mordor, but regardless of whether that's the case or not, Gondor are going to be waiting to use that flaming shot on blobs, so even if it is them trying to fool you, you don't really have a choice but to walk into it. Gondor may be pulling back to the TC as well. They might be, trying to focus on one choke point is better than two from a Gondorian perspective at this point. But they are going to have to focus on two regardless, because Mordor are going to be attacking from the side. Mevin is going to have to take the lead over here though, because WK's army, he undoubtedly has very, very little remaining. So, Gondor consolidating themselves around here. Mostly it looks like Eclipse's army based on the minimap. It's mostly green arrows rather than blue. But both of his allies do still have the odd unit here and there that will be needed in order to try and hold on to things here. Good hits from the archers there. What will Mordor do in the face of Gondor's phalanx? Pikes, two-handed spears with armour piercing of the Fountain Guard. That will probably be enough to rout them. Almost a direct hit, still taking damage. They're almost all on their lonesome as they try and push forward. No, actually. Maybe the orcs stealing themselves at the promise of rotten meat. A few stragglers from the Gondorian force there. And there you can see the orc javelins. The best tool that Mordor has really to try and soften up this front line for the main assault. And I do think Mordor will probably end up winning this fight at this point. I think their numbers are too great. As long as they utilise them correctly, stuff like the Blackguard of Barad-dûr can make the front lines lose their cohesion, which for Gondor at this point they need to remain organised. If they don't, then it's going to be all over for them. 7 Temple Guard remain, getting into a duel with the Warns of Minas Ithil. 2 armour-piercing archers, but the Warns of Minas Ithil much healthier. So that's going to be the end of the foul Black Númenóreans. Are Mordor going to attack from that direction as well? I don't think so. Those Axemen of the Sarnak victorious up on the walls in that rather inconsequential fight in the end, but it's a victory. It does mean they're going to have 92 more Axemen to try and hold on to the town centre with here in the late game. Arrows and javelins being used on the Gondorian front line as Mordor will now start to apply the pressure of their orc horde. Orc javelins. Blackguard of Barad-dûr are hovering in the background with intent. Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. Have a little look further back here. Morale infantry starting to apply the pressure on the back end of the defence as well. The trebuchet crew, presumably it is out of ammunition at this point, and they're trying to get the trebuchet itself in the way so they can't mass push quite so easily. So that's quite a savvy move from the Gondorians, giving themselves a bit of extra cover, but I'm not sure whether that will make the difference between victory and defeat here. Morano on infantry. There's the halberds. So they are going to go right around the houses actually to try and get into a position they can attack from multiple sides on. There's still far too many units outside the city walls for me. Like, Mordor are making more of a meal of this than is necessary. Like, these initial assaults they're throwing in are not going to achieve all that much. They're going to lose more of their manpower. And you can see that there are clumps of orc infantry at this point that are breaking. It's all about unified assaults, and I mean, they're moving in now. I mean, better late than never. More orc javelins as well, which could be so useful. All of these units are buzzards as well. Needs to be a little bit more aggressive than this for me. 1 unit Vuruk captains from Mr. Sneakman, but that's likely his general. Albeit, preserving your general's life at this point is not really all that important, considering the rest of your army, there isn't really much of it, and what is here is on the front line. They'll probably benefit from having the general close by. But so far, Gondor holding fast, but it's against very, very basic units, so how much you choose to read into that is up to you. And over here, continuing to push forward, Moran on guard, having a bit of a hard time of it given the high damage that a lot of these Gondorian units are capable of doing. And Tundra's Trebuchet does have flaming shot remaining. Right into the heart there of the Blackguard of Barad-dûr. Oof, that frame rate. Crunchy. That's what you get when there's so many unit models all at once, and when we're on a detailed map. The Trebuchet does have ammunition. The Blackguard are trying to push forward, but more and more Gondorians are trying to get in the way to prevent Mordor from bursting through, because if they do manage to get through this front line, it will be all over. Mordor should be able to overrun this position. Organisation, he's down to his rotting meat. That is a shame. That is a real shame. Guards of Osgiliath, the mini-map looking more and more red as the Mordor orcs start to wash over the Gondorians, or at least try to. Trebuchet spinning on the spot, as Medieval 2 loves to do, but the Blackguard, to be fair, fizzling out. They have managed to push the Gondor front line back, but they could re-establish their old position. Pelargia Marines shooting into that orc blob as well. Are Mordor going to be able to capitalise on their numbers here, or will the Gondorian quality be the difference maker? Is that orc forces? It is. Are they going to link up with one another? I mean, here is a huge column of Mevon's orc army. It's going to take more than... I mean, I know it's Nimlothian Honor Guard, but it's going to take more than a single unit to stop all of that. And that's going to be the key here. If Mordor can keep all of these assaults going, all four of them going at the same time, Gondor are going to have to choose their battles, and one of their front lines is ultimately going to be destroyed. They obviously have to man that front one, because that's where most of the manpower is coming. Mevon's force over here is dying, though. Might need to commit those Uruk captains sooner than he would have liked, because Gondor are doing a lot of damage to these orcs on this front line. Could end up being a problem. A few of those javelins hitting the Trebuchet, but he's getting some good kills with the Pelargia Marines, at least weakening the Uruk captains. Another unit of Blackguard of Barad-dûr coming in there, another healthy one. Will this Gondorian front line hold up? I don't think they're going to be able to. They're doing a lot of damage here, but too often their engagements earlier on were isolated. And there were just one too many disadvantageous engagements that Gondor took, I think. If they do win, it'll be on the back of their ability to hold the line. With not a lot of units. And even then, can they hold the line given the amount of Mordor pressure that's coming their way? Does the Blackguard get in here? More hits from those arrows. Arrows raining down upon them. Oof, over here, this engagement, the game really doesn't like this one. I mean, Gondor have got a good engagement here. They are very much the outer edge. They've got that crescent moon shape going on. Units surrounded on all sides. Here comes some Minas Morgul chosen, which could be used to try and push through lines. You can see they are actually pushing the Gondorians back a little bit. There's plenty more orcs where that came from, which I think is going to be Gondor's undoing here. They killed a lot of orcs here in the late game, but yeah, they're pushing back through, and they have to try and hold on to just this one choke point rather than the two. That's definitely the right thing to do. Gondor archers, Nimlothian Honor Guard. Veterans of Osgiliath are still shooting into the side of this little force, which it's the clearest shot they have, so they may as well take it. There goes a Gondorian general. The hands of a halberdier, and the Blackguard of Barad-dûr continuing to push their way through. And they are going to make it all the way through, which that will probably be the thing that causes the dominoes to start to fall, because they're going to need to siphon off reserves that they would have held in place for some other choke points. Veterans of Osgiliath continuing to fire in. There's arrows going every which way, but some of them are orcish arrows firing into the Gondor position. Yes, their armour will help them, but It's all just damage which is adding up. They could rout that Blackguard, I suppose, especially given the kind of units that they're facing off against. Fountain Guardsmen are here. They're still eager at this point though, because there's still too many of them left alive. And they've made good progress. Can you imagine the AI having access to the Blackwatch Legion and the Blackguard of Barad-dûr campaign? They'd be a nightmare in sieges. All they want to do is try and push their way through choke points. Orc Javelin shooting into the back of this line here, and that's going to be where we start to see the Orcs completely overrun the brave men of Gondor. Because this is simply going to be too much for the Mordor are going to be able to push through. I mean, to be fair, there's nothing left outside the city at this point, so pretty much everything that's in melee is what they have. There is that clutch of forces from Mevin as well, but anything other than that that's not in melee is the remnants of the Mordor skirmish force. And Gondor backed themselves into the town centre, but in the end it may not have been the best thing to do. They may have wanted to man those outer walls just a little bit longer. Oftentimes we see the undoing of defenders be that they hold on to those outer sections for too long. I think Gondor gave them up a little bit too soon, to be honest with you. And they went for a sort of halfway house where they tried to hold the middle of the settlement, and I don't think it worked out for them. Eclipse's general falls. Go in here, I mean the Blackguard of Barad-dûr, there's only 15 of them left, but in the late game here they've really helped close things out for Mordor, those Blackguards, by buckling the Gondorian front lines. Can't ask for more than that for a unit of that type. Nimlothian Honor Guard going to do their thing. There's still some Uruk captains over here to try and deal with. More Mordor units over here, almost entirely Morannon units led by a single unit of Sauron's Will. But even so, at this point it really is a numbers game. And Mordor's banners will be flying over this ruined city tonight. The Orcs of course won't have the expertise to even fix the damage that they've done to this place. It just gives it character, right? Javelins thudding into the Fountain Guard, who will try their best to fight to the bitter end. I don't know if this is one of those scenarios where the town centre is legitimate or not. I don't think it is, otherwise we probably would have heard the announcer mention something about the town centre already in this fight. Javelins continuing to fire in. More Sauron's Will and Minas Morgul chosen, the upper tier of Mordor's regular army. Closing this fight out. One last... I mean, the fact that that still has ammunition from... is that Tundra's trebuchet? Yeah, I mean, if that was its last shot, then fair enough. If he still has ammunition, I'm not entirely sure what he was waiting for in this fight and waiting that long. Because that trebuchet could have been a real difference maker on one of these front lines if it still had ammunition, and it's a pretty major mistake to have not used it. If that is the case. A case of trying to save something for later, but later never comes. There goes one of Mordor's generals. They've lost a fair few of their generals on the way through here. Indeed, they've lost a fair amount of their army in general. But ultimately, Mordor, being the numbers-focused monsters that they are, it looks dominant, but that is skewed somewhat by the fact that Mordor are one of the more numbers-focused factions in the game, especially with the armies that Eclipse has built here. Two of the armies were mostly entry-level stuff. And it was just a fight where Mordor took the right engagements. Can't say fairer than that. Lothian Honor Guard fighting hard, Uruk captains. Pretty much it. Yeah, so it is actually a town centre. A functioning one. Unlike the TARNOST Orion siege that we beheld. That can't be Eclipse. I think Eclipse might be the only one left standing, actually, looking at this.
Our men have fought long and are becoming tired.
Is that right? Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. Fair play to the Nimlothian Honor Guard. They will probably end up routing before they will die, actually. They're not a locked morale unit, after all. And there is only so long left in this battle, and they're so strong that you would expect if they were to be killed to the last man, there would still be over 1,000 frames left. But a good victory this from Mordor, and they were good value for it. They took the right engagements. Gondor, there were just a few too many cracks in their defence, which Mordor were able to fill with an unrelenting onslaught of orc numbers. And like I said, this is the first of a potential two-parter, so we could be seeing the follow-up to this replay at some stage. Hopefully, if Eclipse wants to give it to me. And there they go, Eclipse finished, and that is going to be that. The orc rabble storms through the centre of this town, of which I will have picked a suitable Gondorian town that this would be and represent. I'm sure one of the easternmost Gondor towns, considering Mordor were the ones that came in. Captain Dwar of War, or WoW. That's a weird name, I've never seen that one before. It stands out a little bit, doesn't it? Regardless, yeah, I think that was the difference here. I think Mordor, there were just a few too many weak spots in how Gondor decided to set themselves up. And as Mordor, it's a very easy thing to exploit that. You just send your orcs through the city in numbers, and they will find weaknesses. Like bloodhounds, if there is a weakness in the defence, then pure orc numbers will be able to overcome it. But yeah, regardless, let's have a little look and see what did the damage for Gondor. Plenty of damage was done, of course. Pelagia Marines doing very well, so a good battle for the Javelin men of Gondor, which we don't often see. They're often a bit of an underwhelming unit, but they did well here. Guards of Osgiliath, Fountain Guard did okay. Gondor Archers doing quite well. Some of the Citadel Guard doing well, but others not so much. 349 on the Trebuchet, so the Trebuchet did quite well. Decent return on those. Going down here, a few breaking 200, including Citadel Guard. Only 4 on that unit of Warns of the White Tower. That's really not enough if you want to be winning this kind of battle. If it's a 3v5, you need units of that quality to be really pulling their weight. 125 is more acceptable. 308 and 261. That's a good return on Fountain Guardsmen. Guards of Osgiliath did well also, so the polearms for this army doing very nicely for themselves. Veterans of Osgiliath also 383. Again, a combination of ranged and obviously being good in melee is a potent mix indeed. 356 kills on those Marksmen of Caer Andros. Again, similar story, albeit a little bit more fragile, but more damaging in melee because they have a two-handed sword. 258 kills on Gondor infantry, that's good, but it is worth bearing in mind that in a situation like this, because Mordor have got a lot of numbers, really lower end stuff, Gondor infantry can be at their most efficient, which is what you're seeing there with 258 kills. So, fair enough, I say Citadel Guard with 272 as well. But yes, a well-deserved victory from Mordor. Not the hardest task for Mordor to flush through a settlement like that and expose weaknesses in the way that they do. But it was interesting. It was certainly very interesting to see the initial bombardment phase and to see the city damaged in the way that it was. It's a very unique thing. There was a scenario that we were going to do with Eclipse, which was something similar, albeit with mangonels in Silmarillion. I do wonder if that's still going to happen at some stage, because that would be some really chaotic fun, but we'll have to wait and see on that one, because the initial bombardment phase bore quite a lot in common with that. You could do something similar in Reforged with the mangonel from the Misty Mountains as well, but I suppose there is the reliability aspect of that as well. Mangonel's a little bit more demanding. That may be why that scenario kept crashing. But we'll have to wait and see. That's something for the future. Something else for the future is a possible part 2, a follow-up to this scenario. I hope to see that at some stage. It would be a lot of fun. But yeah, otherwise, as I've said at the end of many of the battles so far, I've probably undergone some pretty significant upheaval, which I've hopefully already talked about in a channel update, or at least I've let people know via the YouTube community tab. I'd like to make it an actual channel update rather than just the community tab, but time being what it is, you have to make the best use of it, and there's going to be a lot going on basically. So we'll see. I am in the great unknown at this point from my perspective. It's a little bit frightening, but we'll have to wait and see, because by the time this replay comes out I will already have a very clear understanding of how things are going to be progressing and such. So yeah, exciting if slightly scary times, I suppose. But yeah, do keep an eye out. The channel will be continuing as is, or as close to as is as I possibly can, for the time being. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. The channel will not be going anywhere, as I keep reiterating. It's going to continue in as close to its current form as it possibly can. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.